Hey, ladies, you are about to see a clip from our online community of women Bible teachers, our Women Teach the Word network, where we are discussing should we have standards for women Bible teachers? Enjoy. So let's ask the question, should we have standards for women Bible teachers? Can we make a biblical argument for standards for women Bible teachers? So let's cover first a couple of foundational facts here as we get this conversation started. Number one, this is really clear that the Bible does have standards for elders who are men, qualified men appointed to the office of pastor in the church to teach. The Bible has a really overt, clear list of standards for these guys. So here we see that they need to be above reproach, they need to be faithful in marriage, self controlled, respectable, hospitable, able to teach, not alcoholics, not a drunkard, not violent or greedy. Okay, this one's interesting. Note this, managing his household well. This is a pretty unique word in the Greek. It literally means presiding over, or leading or standing before, most literally, standing before the household, presiding over his household. Well, also not a recent convert and having a good reputation with outsiders. And one thing that I really want to point out here is that there are reasons behind every single one of these standards for elders. So, for example, managing his household well. It actually says in the verse right after this, it says, he must manage his own household well with all dignity, keeping his children submissive. Okay, so elders, pastors in the church, they need to be the kind of guy who have control over their kids listen to them. And then it says this is the reason for verse 5, if someone does not know how to manage his household, then how will he be able to care for God's church? So I want us to note that this qualification for the pastor, this qualification for the elder, the reason for it is this dude needs to be able to manage his own household, because as an elder, he's going to be managing the family of God. He's going to be managing the church. So the reason there is important. We'll come back to that. Also, we see the reason behind why he shouldn't be a new convert. It says because he'll get puffed up, he'll get cocky, he'll be conceited, right? So someone becomes a Christian, 2 weeks later, he's a pastor, that's going to go to his head. So it's like, why don't we let that guy like hang out for a little bit so that he doesn't think more of himself than he should. Also, we see that he needs to be well thought of by outsider. And once again, the scripture gives a reason for that. It's so that he won't fall into disgrace, right? He needs to be a guy that like everybody respects, okay? Not just like his mom, not just his best buddy at the church, but like literally like plumbers think this is a good guy. Like normal, non-Christian people actually respect this man, okay? So, and the reason for that is so that he can continue to have the church seen in high regard in the community. So, main point there is that the Bible does have really clear standards for elders. Now, let's look at this. The Bible has no standards or very low standards for everyone else in the church when they're teaching. So like Colossians 3:16, let the word in Christ dwell within you richly, teaching, right? Didascoing, teaching and admonishing one another. So on the one hand, you're like, hey, if you're going to be in this office of pastor, we have super high standards. But if you're just a normal Christian, like there's this other kind of teaching that's not official, it's not recognized. Like everybody can do that one. Even new converts can do that one. Even guys who don't manage their household very well yet can do that one, right? So everyone should be doing this. Now, obviously, everyone should be growing in spiritual maturity in all ways, but there's higher standards for the more recognized kind of teaching. All right? So, let's keep that foundation in our mind as well. So here are a couple of different opinions. We're asking, should we have standards for women Bible teachers? Number one, there are some people who are going to argue that we do not need standards for official women Bible teachers because there's only standards for pastors. There's only standards for pastors because they're the only official teachers in the church. There's no such thing as official women Bible teachers because the only official teaching position in the church is pastors. All right, does everybody see that first stance there? So this would be my reply to that, is that actually I'm going to assert that there's another category, right? So we do have just your average Joe Christian who basically has no standards for teaching. And then we have these elder standards for the pastors who are teaching. But I'm going to say there's a third category over here, which is teachers who are not pastors. I don't think all pastors are teachers. So sorry, I do think all pastors are teachers. I don't think all teachers are pastors. So not all teachers are pastors. And here's my biblical evidence. Acts 13:1 says, now they were in the church in Antioch, prophets and teachers. Well, the interesting thing here in Acts 13 is they hadn't appointed elders yet, right? So they don't have pastors, but they do have people that they've already recognized have the gift of teaching. I'm also going to say this. This is kind of common sense, but follow my logic. I think it's safe. If in order to be appointed as a pastor, a man must be able to teach, that means we know he's able to teach before he's a pastor. Did that make sense? So clearly there was some outlet in the early church for these men to be teaching in some capacity, some provable capacity, even before they're elders. Otherwise, that couldn't be a standard that they'd be held to. So that one's kind of just common sense. But next, in Romans 12, we see that Paul's listing gifts, like having gifts that differ according to the grace given to us. Let us use them. And then listen to this list of gifts. If prophecy, then he tells us how to prophesy. And then he says, if service, so we see service is the second gift there. Then he says to the one who teaches, and then the one who exhorts, and then the one who contributes. So what he's saying here is, hey, there's all these different gifts: prophecy, service, teaching, contributing, people with generosity. And he puts teaching in this list of gifts. So that makes me think, well, if it's just another gift, that doesn't mean it's always an official office, right? Like we don't have the office of contributor or the office of those who exhort necessarily, right? So sometimes it seems like, well, there must just be people who are gifted in teaching, but they don't have an office of teaching. Lastly, this is the strongest argument that I think, and this is matters most for us as women. Titus 2:3. Older women likewise are to be reverent in behavior, not slanderers or slaves to much wine. They are to teach. The root word here is didasko. They are to teach what is good, and thereby, by teaching, they're supposed to train the younger women basically to be godly women of character. So there, I really have to zoom in there and say, well, these older women are not pastors, but they still seem to be uniquely set apart in the church and recognized as women who have a unique capacity of teaching that at least these younger women aren't really recognized as having. So I'm going to say the first stance that says no, the only people who teach are pastors, because that's the only people qualified to teach. I'm going to say no, there seems to be a third category of people who teach, but they are not pastors. I also want to show you these similarities between the pastors and this group of older women. It's fascinating if you check it out. So the qualifications for pastors in 1 Timothy 3, it's almost mirroring the qualifications for these elderly women who teach. So they, for the pastors, they have to be above reproach. For the women, they have to be reverent. For the pastors, they have to be self-controlled. For the women, they teach the younger women to be self-controlled. The pastors have to be not a drunkard. The women have to be not enslaved to much wine. I mean, it's literally almost a mirror here. The pastors, they have to be able to teach. The older women, they have to be able to teach what is good. The pastors have to manage their household well. And then in Titus 2, they have to train the younger women to love their husband and children. So we see that these women are held to a very, very similar standard as those with an official office. I'm not saying that this is an official office, although John Calvin actually thinks that this old lady office is like a technical office of the church, which I think is pretty dope. I'd be totally cool if we had like pastors, deacons, old lady squad. Like, I think that would be great. But either way, I just want to point out that these are very, very similar. Okay, so let's keep rocking. So the first stance says we don't need standards for official women Bible teachers. I'm going to say no. It seems like the New Testament does have space for having standards for people who are gifted in teaching, who aren't your average Joe, but they're also not your pastor. So it seems like we do have a category for what we're going for. So let's look at the second stance. This person would say we do need standards for women Bible teachers, and it is the standards for the elders, right? Women teachers should meet the elders' standards. That would be so the first one was like they don't need standards at all. This one says it's the exact same standards as the elders. Now, there's some good reasoning behind this. As we discuss, and Renee, you said this, Bible teachers wield significant influence over people's souls, so they should be held to high standards. Also, the qualifications for elders at the end of the day, it's just character. It's just being a mature Christian. So you should be a mature Christian. Also, since elders and shepherds and overseers, their moral and doctrinal qualifications should serve as a model. And that's true for all teachers, right? Here's the problem, though, with saying that women Bible teachers should meet the exact same standard as church pastors and elders, is that elders aren't just regular Bible teachers who happen to be men. That's not the case. Some elder qualifications have to do specifically with leading and managing, not teaching. So I want to point out, remember specifically that one qualification, he needs to be able to manage his household. Well, why? Well, because he's going to be managing the church. But see, that's not true. If you got homegirl over here at the women's Bible study, she's not managing the church and doing church discipline in the same way that the pastor is. So I'm going to say, I do think the qualifications should be very similar, but the specific qualifications that have to do with managing and overseeing the church, I don't think those ones should apply because the women who are teaching aren't doing that aspect of the elder's job. So I'm going to give this one a slight thumbs down. I don't quite agree with that stance either. So here's the third stance. This is where I would stand. Women Bible teachers should have standards in the church. So I don't think it's just, hey, if you're saved, you get a microphone. I don't think that's a good idea. But they should be different than the elder standards. Okay. So here's the rationale. The elder qualifications in 1 Timothy 3 and Titus 1 are explicitly for those holding office in the church, not necessarily just for anybody who teaches, right? And while character and doctrinal integrity matters, some elder qualifications, specifically like managing a household well, that may not disqualify a woman in the same way, because you're not leading in the same way that a pastor is. You're not presiding over the household in the same way that a pastor would be. So here's the only challenge here, that if Bible teachers are not held to elder-like standards, what criteria should be used to evaluate their fitness to teaching? Like if we don't just look at that list of qualifications for elders and say, hey, that's it, that's our list, and we say, no, it should be like that list, but a little bit different. Well, who are we to make the call on how the list is different? Who gets to make the standards and where do they come from? If we're not just going to use the standards that we have for elders, we're going to use a different list of standards. What's a responsible biblical way to make that list of standards for women Bible teachers? And that's our next question. Hey, if you're interested in our online community for Bible teachers, make sure you check us out at www.womenteachtheword.com.